That's it. Come on, come on.
Come on, you can do it, Joe. You can do it, Joe. Come on.
You lost last time, but I ain't got this time.
Die, you stupid thing. Die.
Nothing will stop me now. What? What the? Oh. Why must this always happen to me when I'm playing a video game? Oh well. Time for the first Patreon request of the season! As much as I enjoy picking out the flicks, I like even more when people over my Patreon page do. And this one just so happens to come from Andrew Shepard. With his continuing donation and patronage, he was able to get a flick of his choice reviewed right here on the show. I would not only like to thank him for his patronage, but also for the flick choice as well. It's one I've been meaning to see for a long, long time, and regardless of whether I think it's good or bad, I'm glad I finally saw it. That's the important thing. So, thanks, Andrew. If you want to be just like him and get a movie reviewed right here on the show, go over to my Patreon page, make a donation, and I might try and squeeze it in sometime, either this season or next. I got a long list of people to go through, so we all got to take turns, but here's the nifty thing. People who donate $5 and up get endless requests. That's right. You might be able to control the whole season of the show if that's the case. Well, before I think about that nightmarish conquest, today's movie is an interesting one because we are going back to the days of Harryhausen with... So, I was going over the calculations of the oubliette, and there's something I must warn you. Oops. I'm fine. Total control. He'll be fine. No, I won't!
In the jungle I run tonight. Find the beast, the logical light. No confusion, just run the right. Oh yeah. Solving mysteries with nothing to lose. Magic leaves you without any clues. There's only so much one man can do. Oh yeah. Only solution. Jump up and down. I just wanna hear. Only solution. Oh, it won't be long. It won't take too long. Only solution. Jump up and down. I just wanna hear. Logical solutions. Clear visions. Clear visions.
You know, of all the years I've done this show, I've never quite considered or even gave any thought as to what kinds of movies I review. Or discuss, for that matter. I mean, this isn't a show that looks into documentaries, unless your name is Disney's The Sweatbox. This is certainly not a place for historical dramas because there's many liberties when taking historical fact into fiction. For me personally, I'm the kind of person that likes to talk about movies that are underrated, overlooked, ones that once had the spotlight, but now they seem to be fading away. Or in some cases, there is the final clause. Say a movie is doing well in production, but then something on its way to the box office, something happens. Albeit studio interference, or bad marketing. And it's this last case in particular that makes Dolly of Gwangi quite the candidate to talk about on today's show. Once again, we are digging back into the lore of Ray Harryhausen, the man who pioneered special effects and gave us many memorable monsters. While Harryhausen is remembered for his work on the Sinbad movies and other giant monster flicks, there was another creature he animated that is also a signature trademark of his: dinosaurs. When you think about it, it was there from the start. His first feature film, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, incorporated a fictional dinosaur created for the movie, and it helped launch his career. Since then, there have been only 2 of his movies that incorporate these creatures, not including the Animal World documentary. The first being 1 million years BC under Hammer Horror, a fantasy epic that incorporated stop-motion dinosaurs fighting cavemen. The special effects themselves are top-notch, but one can argue the success of the movie was more because of the presence of Raquel Welch. Hey, if she helped Andy Dufresne escape Shawshank, she can help Harryhausen attract the boomer audience of the 1960s. Due to Harryhausen's interest in the past, it made some of his movies a harder sell for changing movie tastes in the 1960s. Harryhausen loved the past and history, while audiences wanted something more relevant at the time. And here is where the second movie comes in. Though interestingly, it wasn't Ray Harryhausen's idea alone, but actually his mentor, Willis O'Brien. Willis O'Brien was notable for his work on 1925's The Lost World and the classic King Kong. At the time, he wanted to make a follow-up to Kong that combined dinosaurs in the Wild West. His version, titled Valley of the Mists, involves some cowboys discovering an Allosaurus in the Grand Canyon and putting it in a Wild West show. It entered pre-production in 1942 at RKO Pictures, and was shortly canned when executives felt the public were disinterested in dinosaurs. Instead, Mighty Joe Young was made, with Harryhausen acting as an assistant animator. After Willis O'Brien passed away in 1962, and some of Harryhausen's films were not doing so well, Harryhausen reunited with producer Charles Schneer and decided to revive O'Brien's Gwangi project, feeling there was enough material to work with. A deal was struck with Warner Brothers to get the movie made, while Harryhausen added his own twist to the story while being faithful to his mentor. One could argue this is almost similar to what Spielberg did with Kubrick's AI, but that has androids and this has an Allosaurus. Once again, we ask that fabled question: if you took away the Ray Harryhausen special effects, what kind of movie would you be left with? With Gwangi, it's a different case. It's a movie stemmed from the idea of a stop-motion animator protege passed down to his apprentice, who went and perfected it. Though last year, when we looked into Clash of the Titans, we saw that there was an equal balance between characters and special effects. In terms of Gwangi, the special effects are good, don't get me wrong, but in regards to story and characters, oh hell no, we ain't doing this joke again. Let's just begin. We open up on Mexico in the early 1900s. First thing I'll give praise is Harryhausen's decision to set the story during the early 20th century. It makes for an interesting setting to see a time before technology advanced us, and it easily removes the need to have cliches like the army getting involved. As the movie begins, a band of gypsies come across one of their own who escaped from the Forbidden Valley with an odd souvenir.
If he does not go back to the Forbidden Valley, we shall all suffer a terrible fate.
Keep your superstitions to yourself, old woman.
One day he will learn to obey the law of Gwangi. Or, like his brother, he will perish.
He who does not return to Blockbuster gets hit with the ultimate late fee! Remember this, folks. It will annoy me later. We jump ahead and get introduced to T.J. Beckenridge, played by Israeli fashion model and actress Gila Golan, and her traveling rodeo show. In all honesty, for a struggling stunt show, it's not that bad. Granted, I won't complain about the stage cowboys and Native American fights, as they are a product of the time. And the obvious use of stop motion for the high dive act I'm okay with, given how hard it would be to have a horse and actress dive from that height. But...
Howdy there, partner.
Ex-partner. And to what do we owe this unpleasant surprise?
yes, her voice is dubbed. and I wouldn't have such a problem with it if it wasn't so poorly done. But the juicy piece of irony is that this actress was hired at the instance of Warner Brothers, only to have her strong Israeli accent be recorded over with someone else.
To get knocked off horses for $10 a day. Well, it's half the risk, twice the pay.
So mind your own business.
I wouldn't nitpick it so much if the dubbing didn't take away from the performance. Though, granted, it's not as terribly bad as what they did to Darby O'Gill and the Little People. The other issue I have is in the form of her ex-boyfriend, Tuck Kirby, played by 1960s TV celebrity James Franciscus. Tuck is a former stuntman that's trying to do more than buy her horse, but also reconnect.
Buffalo Bill wants to buy Omar, the Wonder Horse. He's offering a good price.
And you get 10%, right?
20.
Well, you're not getting one thin dime out of me.
And guess what? Despite TJ rejecting his offer, she still has feelings for him as much as he does. Cliché as this sounds, it could work on paper, but you don't feel that chemistry from Golan and Franciscus when they interact. I get it, they're an old fling and are unsure if they should get back together. Even during the final act, they keep up on the on and off again relationship to the point it gets annoying. So, how does this get bandaged up in the first act? With another cliché in the form of a Mexican boy that wants to join the rodeo.
What about an interpreter?
Don't need an interpreter.
You need a horse, senor.
Now look, boy, I told you I don't need anything. Now get lost, comprende? Adios.
There is no money in that, senor.
Look, I am not hard on child acting. I really try not to be, especially given the time this movie was made in. But if you thought Short Round from Temple of Doom was annoying, try and tolerate this.
I run my own business. My name is Lopez.
Okay, Lopi?
Lopi. The child's name is Lopi. Of all the things you could have named him, I get it. This is a product of its time, and riffing into it would be pretty easy because of the corny, the cliche, the goofy, and the silly, and the jello pudding, whatever. Yeah. There's that, which I could nitpick on for hours, but it's also the character that bugs me. I mean, child acting is one thing, don't get me wrong, but when you write your character to be so cocky and full of himself, you're not gonna redeem him when you put him in harm's danger by plopping him in the middle of a rodeo ring with a live bull.
Y muerte.
And, of course, it's the selfless act that prompts TJ to renew interest in Tuck and accepting his deal. Because nothing says patching up a broken relationship than saving a not-too-smart child from danger. Or, if you want to go with Doc Brown's theory...
That's the Florence Nightingale effect. It happens in hospitals when nurses fall in love with their patients.
Actually, the other reason is a new act TJ has acquired. Get a load of this.
Well, if that don't beat all.
Yeah, remember that thing Carlos retrieved from that person who escaped the Forbidden Valley at the beginning? This is it. A tiny horse. And before anyone jumps to their keyboards to correct me, yes, I'm aware this is modeled after the prehistoric Eohippus. But perhaps more interesting is that this particular plot point was taken from Willis O'Brien's original story treatment. But, okay, you got yourself a tiny horse. What kind of special act do you plan to do with it?
We strap a platform onto Omar's back, and El Diablo waltzes on top.
A horse dancing on horseback. It's gotta be a humdinger.
Fine. I won't question how Tiny Horse is able to perform its tricks on top of a tiny platform tied to a larger horse without the questioning aspect of, what if, just what if, during the tiny horse's act on top of the bigger horse, the platform slips off? That would be a very damaging spectacle. Tuck is friends with Professor Bromley, played by Lawrence Nailsmith, who exists just to confirm this is a prehistoric creature and marvel at the possibilities.
If I can prove that this is the genuine article, I shall undoubtedly receive a knighthood, Mr. Kirby, for the greatest scientific discovery of the age.
TJ doesn't know what she's got herself.
Sir Horace Bromley.
It'll look great in lights.
Galileo, Newton,
Buffalo
Darwin,
Bill, Barnum and Bailey.
Watch the prophets come rolling in. Watch the prophets come rolling in.
If you've noticed by now, it's not the story I'm having issues with, but really the characters and their motivations. And granted, this is your typical run-of-the-mill monster film, but that's fine. You can just take that and turn to anything. Mighty Joe Young, great example. You have a really good creature and some very good characters that are well developed to go with it. Here, when your character is about as interesting as toast, you're just waiting for the monsters to come along and do their thing. But, okay, say you go to see a Ray Harryhausen movie just to see the stop-motion creatures. Fine. In any case, it's the stop-motion creations that are the true celebrities of those movies, and not the characters. But even when you look at something like, say, Clash of the Titans or The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, there is a good balance between the two that makes you invested into the adventure. But given how we have get to these giant special effects sequences, it becomes boring given the amount of setup that we're given, and not to mention how disinterested these main leads are. If that weren't enough, there are some cliched elements that seem awfully familiar. Tough as nails romance lead, a somewhat feisty lady, a guy who is knowledgeable in facts of history, and a group of people that live by their own mythology. Still drawing a blank? Don't worry, we'll get back to that later. So Dr. Fezziwig tells Tia, the one-eyed gypsy leader, to steal the Eohippus and release it into the wild, thinking it will lead them to the Forbidden Valley. Apparently Tia believes the Eohippus is cursed and feels bringing it back home will set things right. Well, not when you have a rodeo group and a stuntman seeking fortune from the tiny horse, and a professor who seeks to find more creatures in the Forbidden Valley.
That's my horse! That's my horse? Yes, that's my horse! That's my horse! That's my horse! My horse! That's my horse! Okay, Ed, it's my horse! No way, it's my horse!
I know it sounds like I'm coming down hard on Gwangi, but believe me when I say there is good stuff to talk about here. And when we come back from our tiny commercial break, we'll see if Harryhausen's special effects can truly save this movie.
Gwangi, is that Rupert Murdoch's next contest?
No. Sorry about
Hit the trail, will you?
Introducing Munchos.
Munchos.
The all-new potato snack from Frito-Lay.
Like Munchos.
It's not a potato chip, it's a potato crisp.
Love Munchos.
It's thicker than a potato chip, thus it's crisper, with more potato flavor.
Found Munchos.
Try them. You'll discover there's more to a Muncho.
Believe it or narf.
Narf, 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 narf.
Be amazed by the provocative coincidences that lead investigators to believe that a famous late-night talk show host and a legendary basketball coach both had the same orthodontist.
Narf, narf, narf.
Be astonished by the story of a popular television actor's touching reunion with his long-lost son.
Narf, 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 narf.
And be amused by actual footage of an American First Lady arriving at a political function, having totally forgotten to put on her skirt. We challenge you to believe it or narf.
Narf, 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 narf.
Check local cable listings for times. Knowing cable probably runs about 70 times this week.
More coffee, Tom?
No, thanks, dear.
Try one of these Gino's pizza rolls, Brad. They're great.
Okay. It's a nice party, Mrs. Clark.
I see your husband didn't like your coffee.
I beg your pardon?
I'm Mrs. Johnson. You should try my coffee.
Look, I don't know who you are or how you got into my house, but you take your coffee and leave, okay?
What's that?
Beats me. Do you like the pizza rolls?
Wild. They taste like cheeseburgers.
And these taste like chili burgers, and then over here I have ham and cheese.
You seem to have everything, Mrs. Clark. Ever think you had bad breath, too?
No, but you do. Nice thing about these pizza rolls, you just take them out of the freezer and pop them into the oven.
Please, Clark, start wearing cleaner blouses.
I'll give you 30 seconds to take your blouse and get out of my house. Another Gino's pizza roll.
This is a wild party.
In this neighborhood, we get all the nuts.
Starkiss presents Charlie the Tuna.
I know what that is, Charlie.
Yeah, what is it?
A modern statue.
Yeah, you looked at the label.
Yeah. What you doing with it, Charlie?
Sending it to Starkiss so they'll notice what good taste I got.
They can tell from that?
Of course, dummy. They know that only guys with real good taste can stand to be around this junk.
That makes sense. That makes sense. But, Charlie, they ain't exactly looking for tunas with good taste. Starkiss wants tunas that taste good.
Nah, here they come. Can you see it from up there?
Sorry, Charlie, but only the best tasting tuna get to be Starkist. Best tasting because Starkist is 100% prime filet.
It is the best tasting tuna.
For the best tasting tuna, get Starkist.
Tell him Charlie sent you.
Sven, look out. He's coming out of the valley. He's huge. He's deadly. He's...
Jim, it's the valley of Gwangi, not Gumby.
Oh, never mind.
When it comes to Harryhausen's movies, we often see them just for the special effects alone. While the stop-motion animation is a very important storytelling tool, the story and characters are as well. Granted, it's nice to see creatures running amok, but they help us sell the effect even more. And there's plenty of Harryhausen movies I can recommend where that is perfectly balanced. 20 Million Miles to Earth, Jason the Argonauts, the Sinbad movies, you name it. Here, when it comes to Gwangi, after going through so much setup and spending so much time with these characters that by the time we finally get to a Harryhausen stop-motion creation, we just raise our hands up in the air and go, finally! And that's not what we want, and that's the problem I have with this movie so far. It's such a tedious wait that once we finally get to these creations, it's a big sigh of relief. But is it enough to save the movie? Well, about that. Well, we do get to the Forbidden Valley, which is located in a small slot canyon. Our leads inch through to find the bite-sized equestrian, but find a bigger surprise.
I've gone back to the time when dinosaurs weren't just confined to zoos.
Yes! My prayers have been answered! I mean, oh no, Lobie, I hope he doesn't get turned into bird food. That would be awful. Okay, the kid does live, and I admit, Harryhausen's work here is top-notch. Despite the limited amount of dinosaurs running around, the interaction between live action and special effect is charming and seamless. I heard somewhere the director hired for Gwangi was not in best form, so Harryhausen had to communicate how the special effects scenes were to be executed. With that said, it probably explains my lackluster feelings in the first half, given the way certain scenes are directed, but I digress. Because we have our title character to get to! And here we have the ruler of the Land of the Lost, Gwangi. A vicious Allosaurus that has probably the most personality out of all the characters in this movie. I'm not kidding. When Harryhausen animates a monster or an animal, there's this distinctive personification added that helps us feel we know what the creature is thinking. With Gwangi, we get a sense of the monster's territorial feel and dominating personality when it walks the screen. Of course, I can't leave out the most important sequence when our cowboys try to capture Gwangi with lassos. Granted, it's a scene duplicated from Mighty Joe Young, but it feels perfected here. This particular special effect took a little over 2 months to film as actors had to rope lassos over a pole attached to a jeep. Afterwards, Harryhausen would step in, optically remove the jeep with Gwangi, and actually animate the ropes around the model dinosaur's neck. No matter how many times I see this scene, I can never stop looking at where the real ropes are connected to the animated ones. It's still impressive. And yes, this scene was so iconic that it would be later homaged in Steven Spielberg's The Lost World Jurassic Park. In fact, the crew of ILM admits to using Gwangi as a reference point for how the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park should move. Again, a testament to how helpful the past can be for the future.
Pocket sand.
Well, anyway, our heroes managed to escape with Gwangi, but not without losing Carlos and having the entrance to the valley sealed off via convenient rock slide.
We're gonna lug this critter back alive. TJ, honey, you're gonna have the greatest main attraction at any circus.
See the connection yet? People go to a mysterious place, find a creature they've never seen before, capture it, bring it back to civilization on a big extravagant show where it gets loose and runs amok and destroys some stuff. Well, either you've been living under a rock, or chances are you've never seen King Kong. The 1933 version. And yes, this was Willis O'Brien's intent. He wanted Gwangi to be a follow-up to King Kong, where people capture an Allosaurus and bring it back to their Wild West stunt show. And before you ask, does this qualify Gwangi to be a ripoff? The answer is no. It's something different. A clone. And that's not a bad thing. There are plenty of things that some movies, TV shows, and even comic books have cloned from others. You have DC doing Greek gods and goddesses. I could name plenty of anthology TV shows off the top of my head that have borrowed from other anthology TV shows. But I think the best example I can give is Star Fox Adventures. The gameplay is good and it's fun, but when you really scrape the surface, it's a Legend of Zelda game. But still a fun one at most. And that doesn't constitute Gwangi as a bad movie. It's still interesting in its own right, given it's taking these story elements and doing something different with them. That's the important thing. The only crime it has against it is having characters that are not as engaging or even memorable as Ann Darrow, Carl Denham, or Jack Driscoll.
Joe, you don't usually see these two types of things together. No, you don't. Not since that Laurel and Hardy shorts in 1924.
The final 20 minutes of the movie almost make up for it, as the circus uses Gwangi for their new center attraction. Of course, here's where the creature gets loose and causes trouble. But how does it, you ask? Well, Tia is not pleased with them bringing home an Allosaurus, as it's against the law of Gwangi, and decides to free it during its own unveiling. Look, I understand wanting to get this creature back to its home, but I have so many problems with this decision. 1, the valley is blocked off by a rock slide. Nobody goes in, and nobody goes out. 2nd, before the cowboys left, they accidentally set a brush fire, causing a lot of damage to the place. I can only imagine how big of a gorge it looks at this point. 3rd, if you wanted to free a prehistoric creature, you probably should not have done that during its debut. Oh, and you gotta love how Tia says she can see into the future, and yet doesn't seem to foretell certain things like her accomplice being a meal and her own death as she gets trampled on by a panicking crowd. I know it's just a movie, but there's a fine line between escapism and the stupidity of a character.
You see? You see? Your stupid minds! Stupid! Stupid!
One fight with an elephant later, which admittedly I feel 20 Million Miles to Earth did better, Gwangi is set on the loose, and his demise is pretty cool. I can't recall the last time a monster movie had a creature getting trapped in a cathedral that gets set ablaze. It's well executed, and the tension does work on the scale of the building and the creature.
And nothing of value was lost.
Once again, I remind, all of this chaos began because of Tiny Horse. The will of how we came from point A to point 42 astounds me on many levels. Regardless, while I don't think Valley of the Gwangi is a bad movie per se, it's the treatment of the characters and the cliches that they use that fail to impress me. Okay, I know a lot of people really love this movie, so let me talk about the stuff I liked first. Ray Harryhausen's effects are solid as always. The concept alone of combining two different genres between westerns and a monster flick are unique, and there are some really cool set pieces. But as top-notch as the special effects are, I do feel the characters could have been written better or fleshed out more. I don't mind cloning the story and character beats of another monster movie, but there's just something missing here. It lacks the flair of Harryhausen's Sinbad movies, and its message of exploiting a creature feels executed in better movies. On the whole, it doesn't make me say Gwangi is a bad movie. It's enjoyable in its own right, but it leaves me feeling so much more could have been done to improve it. And it breaks my heart to say this, because when Gwangi was released to theaters in 1969, it was a major box office disappointment. But the movie's not to blame. When production ended and everything was completed, new management came into Warner Brothers, and they just dropped that film into theaters without any major publicity or fanfare. The flop was so big that Harryhausen and Schneer went back to Columbia, made another Sinbad movie, and they were able to rebound. Though Gwangi's tale doesn't end there. It was able to do better on a double billing with the cult classic When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth, and over time it has gained a cult audience. So don't take my word for it. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean you can't. Maybe you'll find it better than I did. So, of course, I do recommend this movie, but with a tiny suggestion. Go in with the perception of a fun flick, but be aware it takes some time to get to those good moments. And the will of a movie's success is not based on one person's opinion alone, but the audience it draws. Yeah, I know, I probably was a little too hard on this film, and maybe I expected a lot more out of it because it is a Ray Harryhausen movie. But hey, a mixed bag reception is better than a negative one. Next time, we are taking a look at another 1960s cult classic that is dearly close to my heart. It's a cornerstone of special effects makeup that makes any makeup fan jealous of its existence. Sure, it's dated, and its box office performance wasn't good at the time, but it's one I feel that should not be forgotten. What could it be? Is it something that's special? Or is it something I'm gonna get a lot of disagreements on? Especially given how dated it is. Tune in next month, and I'll tell you all about it.
Wild, wild. When I roll into the Wild Wild West, when I stroll into the Wild West, when I bounce into the Wild Wild West, we're going straight to the Wild Wild West. We're going straight to the Wild Wild West. Can you feel it? Come on, come on, yeah. Keep it moving, keep
gun weighing a ton, 10 paces and turn just for fun. Sun up to sundown, rolling around, see where the bad guys ought to be found and make them lay down. The defenders of the West, crushing all pretenders in the West. Don't mess with us, cause we in the Wild Wild West. When I roll into the Wild Wild West, when I stroll into the Wild Wild West, when I bounce into the Wild Wild West, when I roll into the Wild Wild West, when I stroll into the Wild Wild West, when I bounce into the Wild Wild roll into the, when I stroll into the Wild Wild West. I done it again, y'all. Done it again.
When more unusual pictures are made, you may be sure George Powell will make them. His War of the Worlds, Time Machine, and Destination Moon are now joined by the strange and fascinating adventures of Dr. Lau and his amazing companions.
You wish your future told?
How do you do? The name is Merlin. I am the greatest magician the world has ever known.
Hi there. Do I look familiar to you?
What kind of Oriental hocus pocus is going on around here?
I, sir, am a major mystery.
Out of nowhere he came, a mysterious stranger. And for those he opposed or defended, life was never again the same.
This town ain't big enough for you and me, partner.
A magician, surely, but one who made his magic with such things as love's young dream and the fun in a little boy's heart. Here truly is entertainment for all ages.
I was born in the year 1204.
I am 7,322 years old.
I'm 8 going on 9.
Here is the mysterious beauty of the Far East and the roaring action of the Far West. The thrill spectacle of the city that never was, and the most fabulous fish story in history.
Hello, goodbye, thank you.
Cut.
Looks like you're in a Harryhausen movie.
Oh, it's so horrible! Right here in the valley of the Gwangi.